What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. And in today's video, we are going over the top trade targets, the guys that you should be buying low on, and also the guys that you should be selling high on. Remember, it's extremely important if you're going to be doing any sort of trade to make sure that you are maximizing value. You don't want to buy in on a guy that's at peak value who's coming off of a monster game, and you don't also want to liquidate a guy just because he had a dud, and especially in week one. And I will say that the earlier part of the season is a little bit more difficult to trade in. A lot of players have a trickle down value that stems from actual draft day. People aren't very likely to pay up for the late round guys. They're also not very likely to get rid of those high draft capital players. But if you're smart, you can use that to your advantage and get some good deals. And today we will be going over the players that you should buy low on and sell high on. Before I do get into it though, I do have to just have a one-on-one with you guys. I know I put out some misinformation in yesterday's video. I just want to tell you guys, I'm super sorry. I really hope you don't hold it against me. Believe me, I'm well aware that Benjamin Watson is on the Saints. What happens is I have NFL Sunday ticket. I'm going through like 8 games at a time and I'm making notes on players. And Benjamin Watson was a player I wrote down this one note on, and it said, looks good, solid connection. That was it. That was my note on Ben Watson. And when later on, when I was going through the matchups, for some reason in my head, I thought Ben Watson and related it to the Ravens. So when I looked at that Ravens matchup and saw that it was against Cincinnati, the rest was history. But regardless, that's no excuse. I'm sincerely apologetic about it, and I hope you don't hold it against me, and definitely not the channel. It's well within your right to expect the highest quality from us. We definitely want to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and I'm definitely going to be fully accountable for this error. I'm just asking you guys, please give me the benefit of the doubt. Please don't crucify me for this one. I promise I'm going to be pumping out good content for you for the remainder of the season. It was really difficult for me to put this message together, but I thank you all for understanding. But now into some brighter news. Let's get into the trade targets. I'm going to start with the sell high candidates. I think the strategy I'm going to employ is to talk about top 2 running backs and top 2 wide receivers, both buy low and sell high. If there is a specific situation where there's a quarterback or a tight end, I'll throw it in there. But generally, quarterbacks, you're going to have to pay more than what you're going to get in return for value. And then with tight ends, I know that it's going to be a major target for some of you that lost Walker and Olsen to want to try and lock down a player like Ertz, who's coming off of a mediocre game. But believe me, you're going to be paying an arm and a leg for it. You're better off streaming. Even though this season's tight ends lack that high-end upside, there's definitely a lot of potential players that you can stream week in and week out. But to start with running backs, we have Crowell of the New York Jets. So for those stat line chasers, Crowell posted a monster stat line. He rushed for over 100 yards and even scored twice. I know he won a ton of people money in DraftKings, and right now is the best chance you're gonna have at targeting those RB needy teams, because remember, McKinnon went down, Le'Veon Bell, his status is still up in the air. There are a lot of teams that drafted McKinnon and need a running back. Just go through your league mates one by one and just look at what they have at the running back position and just target that team. Send an offer out there, because Crowell posted borderline top 5 running back numbers last week. And when you're sending that offer, you're hoping that they're just looking at the box score, because realistically, he only got 10 touches. So over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 touches, and none of that work was in the receiving game. But don't think you just need to get rid of him for nothing, because he still will hold some value. I'd recommend putting him as part of a package deal, maybe making him the lesser known player in the deal. So maybe having a high value wide receiver and then Crowell, then try to acquire an upgrade at the receiver position while taking on one of those late round flyer running backs. Why we don't think Crowell can be a continuous top 20 producer week in and week out is mostly because Bilal Powell, he did rush the ball 12 times compared to Crowell's 10, and Powell also had 2 targets on the game. Crowell, he had none. You can only do so much with the short yardage and goal line duties, and in PPR leagues, that's just too much week to week volatility. But considering that he finished as a solid RB1, his value is inflated and he may never be worth as much as he is worth today, so take advantage of it. Moving on, we have James White, and White has been used a ton so far this season, and I'm not just talking the game 1, I'm talking also preseason. You can tell he's been a pretty big part of the game plan so far. In week 1, he only got 5 attempts on the ground, but where he really made his money was in the receiving game. He got a massive 9 targets. Those type of target numbers at the running back position are extremely hard to come by, and in PPR leagues, they hold a ton of value. So why would we be saying to sell high on James White? Well, the reality is Sony Michel is coming back soon, and they also have Rex Burkhead. I understand that they lost Jeremy Hill, and Rex Burkhead will take over some of those responsibilities. But you have to understand that both Burkhead Burkhead and Michel can catch passes extremely well, which means White's volume in the receiving game is probably going to be declining as the season goes on, as Sony Michel hits the field, as they get him more involved. Remember, his career high in targets in a single season is 86, not receptions, targets. His pace right now, I know it's one game, 144. You just can't expect it every week, and as soon as Sony Michel comes, it's going to throw a big wrench in that. That target market share is completely unsustainable. They just signed Corey Coleman, and while I know he's a receiver, that's just more mouths to feed in this offense. And I know that there are probably a few of you out there that don't believe that the role of James White will decrease as the season goes on, and that's a good thing, because when we're looking for people to trade with, we want to find people that buy into this player. And if people are buying into James White, which why shouldn't they, right? He had 9 targets, he had a good touchdown. That means there are potential buyers out there that want to get a piece of the Patriots offense, and he outproduced Rex Burkhead in week 1, so send an offer to those people. But that's it for running backs. On to wide receivers. Shouldn't come as a surprise, Randall Cobb. Really hurts me to say this because I absolutely love Randall Cobb. I drafted him in almost every league. I was touting that he was a good start in week 1 for wide receiver needy teams, maybe those teams that had Josh Gordon, maybe those teams that had Doug Baldwin who wanted to take a wait and see approach. I said don't be afraid to throw in Randall Cobb, and he outperformed my wildest expectations. And when we're predicting what he can do throughout the season, his role should remain unchanged. He should be a PPR guy. So if teams are smart, they're going to want to get a deal with Randall Cobb. But at this point, he's coming off of a beastly performance, which means you have to be accepting offers for him. If healthy, we know he can sustain potentially wide receiver 2 numbers at a high end, but the problem is he can never stay healthy. And second off, we saw Aaron Rodgers go down. If anything happens to Rodgers, his value will almost certainly be thrown right out the window. And the way that Kaiser looked when he was playing against the Bears, I wouldn't even be afraid to say that he could be a downgrade from Brett Hundley. So for those reasons, I would much rather put him on the trade block and see what type of offers you can get in return. And the last sell high wide receiver we have is Robbie Anderson of the New York Jets. And Sam Darnold, he looked really good in week 1. Definitely gave the Jets something to look forward to for the upcoming season. But as for Robbie Anderson owners, I don't think they feel the same way, because even though he scored a 41-yard touchdown doing Robbie Anderson things, he did that on just 1 target. 1 target, 1 reception, 41 yards, and a touchdown. This season, unlike other seasons, it's very likely that he may not see the massive target market share that he has. And in fact, the guy that we want to own in this New York Jets offense is going to be none other than Quincy Enunwa, who saw double-digit targets and passed the eye test in every way imaginable. Now, I don't think that you're going to be getting top dollar for Robbie Anderson. I still think he holds more value today than he did on draft day. And in a week where most of the top receivers were relatively unknown players or even undrafted players, I think Robbie Anderson has a familiar face that a lot of people will be interested in. Moving on to the buy low options. Coming into week 2, we have Royce Freeman of the Denver Broncos, and every Royce Freeman owner, even myself, was extremely disappointed last week with the emergence of Phillip Lindsay. We couldn't really be disappointed the fact that he lost touches. I mean, we knew he wasn't going to be getting a full RB1 workload, but we just expected it to be Booker, not Phillip Lindsay. But if you ask me, I'm actually happier that it was Lindsay as opposed to Booker. I mean, assuming that Booker would have performed well on a per touch basis. And the reason I say that is because Lindsay is 5'8", 190. He's not the prototypical build of an every down back, and you can't just give a guy that size upwards of 20 touches per game, which is exactly what they did. And even though he performed well, Royce Freeman also performed well. Both backs ran the ball 15 times for exactly 71 yards, averaging 4.7 yards per carry. I would be more concerned if Lindsay mopped the floor with Freeman and Freeman just looked like the lesser back out there, but Royce still did look good. And considering that he is 6 foot, 238 pounds, there is a distinct role for him. And it's also very likely that we could see an increase in touches for Freeman from this point forward. But don't get me wrong, a lot of people are concerned though. That's why we're saying he's a buy low candidate. Now, we're not recommending breaking the bank for him. We do know he was a 3rd round pick, maybe 4th round pick, but I'll tell you what, if you could get Royce Freeman for Isaiah Crowell by throwing in a couple players and doing some mixing and matching, you already won heading into week 2. Moving on, we have Alex Collins of the Baltimore Ravens, and this buy low candidate is definitely a bit more risky. I personally don't believe that Collins is at risk of losing his job. A, because even though that he fumbled, the team put him back in later on in the game, and B, it was a complete blowout. They had the luxury of sitting Collins with no potential consequences. And yes, his efficiency was not good. It was actually horrid, but until the game was out of contention, all the running backs had terrible efficiency. And you know what? Kenneth Dixon, who actually looked the best down the stretch, is already hurt. This dude cannot stay healthy to save his life. But remember, I did say that this trade would come with its risks, because if he does fumble again, it could be weeks before he gets a large workload again, or even worse, it could turn into a full-blown committee. But the good news is, he's on a team with a great defense, and even though they won by 40 points last week, I fully expect that most of the games that they're going to have are going to be relatively close, meaning they're not going to be playing from ahead so much and putting in their bench players. And if the game's on the line, they're going to want to put in their best players. Their best player right now is Alex Collins, so if you can get him on your team on the cheap, I say pull the trigger. Moving on to the wide receiver buy lows, we have Devin Funchess of the Carolina Panthers, and this is the guy that I'm targeting in most leagues because you're going to get him from bottom dollar. Now, he didn't completely crap people's teams, but he certainly disappointed the owners, and where he went in drafts means they're not invested too highly in him. Funchess saw 5 targets all game, was only able to turn that into 3 receptions for 41 yards. Don't be worried about this performance. We've said it before in previous videos, but the Cowboys defense is a bit underrated. It's not amazing, they're not going to create a lot of turnovers, but they're also not going to allow a ton of points either. They have a ground and pound, slow style of offense that milks the clock, leading to very few opportunities to score, so Funchess is going to have better games, and that was with Olsen on the field. Now there's no Olsen. Remember, last season when Funchess was going completely bonkers, posting wide receiver 2 numbers every week, that was when Olsen was injured. Now Funchess is going to get even more targets, and we already know he's going to be the main option in the red zone, and the fact that you can get him for virtually nothing makes this a slam dunk target. Now the final player we have is T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts, and what did we say was the big concern with Hilton coming into the season? We all said if Luck was healthy, T.Y. was a top fantasy option. If Luck was injured, T.Y. Hilton was overpriced, and that held true. Well, now we're 1 game into the season, and we all watched Andrew Luck play, and what did we see? Andrew Luck is healthy. We want to get T.Y. Hilton on our teams, and the good thing, T.Y. Hilton didn't put up monster numbers. He did catch a touchdown, but it wasn't a big highlight play touchdown, the one that's going to be playing on SportsCenter every week, inflating his fantasy value. But quietly, he racked up 11 targets, and 11 targets for T.Y. Hilton is a lot. Remember, he's a deep threat. Deep threats don't normally get 11 targets, meaning nothing's changed. He's the main read in an Andrew Luck-led offense, a healthy Andrew Luck-led offense, and that means you need to throw out a trade for him. If you can put something together that's a sum of less than a mid to low end wide receiver 1, you're going to be getting a good deal, because that's more than likely where he's going to end up finishing. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and again, I'm sorry for the mishap in yesterday's video. Please don't hold it against me or the channel. We really look forward to continuing to provide you guys great content. Once again, if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.